Welcome to this presentation on note-taking, tips and methods, part 1. I want to start with a quote from Paul Theroux from A World Duly Noted, Wall Street Journal, 2013. He said, "I write down everything and never assume that I will remember something because it seemed vivid at the time. If you're like me, I think I will remember something and I won't write it down and I never remember it. Has that ever happened to you? This is why note-taking is important." Note-taking matters. It's been shown to improve learning in 2 main ways. It ensures that you're actively listening and requires you to think about what you're writing, which forms new pathways in the brain, storing information more firmly into long-term memory. So it actually changes the pathways in your brain so that you can remember things. And then, of course, it gives you the opportunity to revisit information later and reinforce learning that happened the first time around. So there's something there for you to review. According to Dr. Walter Palk of Cornell University, 60% of content learned is forgotten within 2 weeks without notes. 60% is forgotten. That's most of what is learned. You will lose within 2 weeks. While having a note-taking system that requires review and critical thinking results in almost 90 to 100% retention. So that evidence right there should convince you that you should take notes. Note-taking during lecture and reading helps comprehension and retention. There's no other way to put it. More is better. In general, the more notes a student takes, the more information they tend to remember later. That should be obvious. More complete notes will result in better learning because you have more to review. You've sunk more of that information into your brain. But be strategic. Write out your notes in your own words, not verbatim from the teacher or the textbook. Just copying what someone else says doesn't transfer it into your brain. It's just a rote memorization type of a thing. It doesn't turn it into learning. Stick to keywords and very short sentences, just enough to trigger your memory when looking at them again. Don't try to write in complete sentences. That just wastes time. And remember, nobody else has to look at your notes and understand them. It's just for you. So just write enough that you're going to understand. Write down what matters, not every detail. This is tricky, of course. You have to be able to pick out what the most important details are, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Create a consistent system of symbols and abbreviations to organize information quickly, such as an asterisk to denote an important point, or a question mark to denote something you want to research or ask about later. I use the BC to mean because or WO to mean without, just to shorten. You can create your own shorthand as long as you remember what you mean. This cuts down on time when taking notes and it saves space on the paper as well. Common note-taking mistakes. Attempting to transcribe word for word and failure to summarize. Don't do this. Don't try to take down every word. You want to just summarize the main points. Keeping notes in different places, disorganization. You want to be as organized as possible. It's a good idea to have notes for each class in a separate binder or within one section within a larger binder so that you know where everything is and you don't lose pieces. It's also a good idea to label the notes with chapter headings or dates of lectures. Not asking for clarification, repetition, or to slow down. You need to talk to your instructor. Ask your teacher if they're going too fast or if you didn't catch something. Politely ask the teacher to repeat something. Most of the time they will. If they won't, go to them during office hours and ask for clarification. Losing the general theme or topic due to inappropriate or missing headings, subheadings, or keywords. As I mentioned before, label your notes. Make sure you've got headings and subheadings so that you can find information easily when you're going back over to review. Writing so quickly that the notes are illegible. Obviously, if you write really sloppily, Your notes aren't going to do you any good. So make sure you write as neatly as you can, even though you're trying to write quickly. Better listening and reading equals better note taking. Listen, look for what, why, how, who, where, and when. So those are the key words you've probably heard before, maybe in a writing class. These are the important words to listen for or look for when you're reading, because they indicate important pieces of information: what something is, why something is happening, how it's happening, who the important people are, where something happened, when something happened. Those are usually key pieces of information to listen for. Listen and look for cues. Pauses in a lecture. When an instructor pauses, that usually means they're heading into a new idea, so there's probably something new for you to take note of. In text, this is indicated by a space that indicates we're moving on to something new. Changes in volume or pitch in a lecture can indicate that something new is coming, that something is important. Changes in a font is the equivalent in a text. When something changes to bold or italic, that usually indicates that this is something important to make note of. There are often visual cues with body language in a lecture. You kind of have to get to know your instructor to recognize the visual cues, but when they start gesticulating their hands or when they're pointing to something, that's usually an indication that they've said something important or that they want you to pay attention. Sharing of graphics or writing keywords or phrases in a lecture or a text. So obviously when an instructor writes something on the board, that's going to be something you want to write down. Or if they share images, graphics, things like that, those are important. And when those things show up in a text, or when there's a sidebar, maybe something in a box that's set off to the side, those are often very important things. Repetition of an idea or information in either a lecture or a test is important. If it's something that the writer or the lecturer has deemed important enough to repeat, it's important enough to make note of. Listen and look for phrases signaling a preface or introduction to a main idea. These can be things like, there are 3 reasons why, or first, second, third, or, and most important, a major development. These are all phrases that signal here comes something important to pay attention to. So listen for phrases like that. Listen and look for signals indicating supporting material. Let me give you an example. For example, similarly or in contrast, also or next, further or furthermore, on the other hand or on the contrary. These are all indications that there's a piece of information coming that supports what came before, so it might be worth noting. And then finally, listen and look for direct signal phrases. Now, this is important. Remember that. The important idea is that. The basic concept here is. So you want to make sure that you're listening when a teacher is actually telling you, hey, this is going to be important. Okay, this is the end of part 1. Please come back and watch part 2. I hope your note taking is improving with this information. Thank you.